October 14, 1993. 3:17 a.m. Black Mesa. Listening station, New Mexico. For exactly 72 seconds, something spoke. Not in words, not in sound, but in a pattern so precise that the technician watching the monitor stopped breathing, because nothing in the sky was supposed to look like that. It never happened again. No second signal, no echo, no explanation that survived scrutiny. And whatever caused it, if it was real, then for just over a minute, something reached across a distance we don't know how to measure, and then decided not to try again. The desert at night is not silent. That's the first lie people tell themselves. Even at 3 in the morning, even miles from the nearest road, there is always something moving. Wind worrying the scrub, insects ticking like faulty relays, the low electrical hum of equipment that never sleeps. Black Mesa Listening Station sat on a plateau of dry rock and dust, chosen not for beauty, but for emptiness. No cities for hundreds of miles, no radio towers, no commercial air traffic overhead, just darkness, stars, and a cluster of concrete buildings that look temporary even after 30 years. Inside, the air smelled faintly of metal and old coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, their rhythm so constant that most people stopped hearing it after a week. The main control room held 6 workstations arranged in a shallow arc facing a wall of monitors. Each screen displayed a different slice of the sky, translated into numbers and lines that only a handful of people in the world could read fluently. On the night shift, there were 3 of them. No one important, no one famous, just people who preferred the graveyard hours because the data came in cleaner when the rest of the world was asleep. Ellen Park had been at the station for 11 years. She liked the predictability of it. Cosmic background radiation did not care about her personal life. Pulsars did not change their behavior because she was tired. The universe, for all its size, was comfortingly consistent. Mark Delaney was newer. A contractor, technically. Signal processing specialist. He still felt the need to prove himself, which meant double-checking things that didn't need to be checked and apologizing when nothing was wrong. The third was Luis Herrera, maintenance and systems oversight. He spent most nights reading paperback novels at his desk, glancing up every few minutes to confirm that everything was still doing exactly what it had done the night before. And that night, it was. The arrays were aligned. The receivers were stable. The sky, as far as anyone could tell, was behaving. The work was routine to the point of tedium. A slow scroll of data, occasional spikes that resolved into known sources, artificial satellites, distant quasars, the background hiss of the universe itself, steady and indifferent. At 3:16 a.m., Ellen logged a calibration check. Everything within expected parameters. At 3:17, the line on her primary display stopped being ordinary. It wasn't dramatic at first, no alarms, no flashing warnings. Just a deviation so slight that, under different circumstances, she might have ignored it until the next scheduled review. A narrowband spike. Extremely narrow. So narrow, in fact, that it didn't behave like noise. Ellen leaned forward. The spike wasn't drifting the way natural sources usually did. It was fixed, locked to a frequency with an almost aggressive precision. She frowned, fingers moving over the keyboard to pull up secondary analysis. Mark noticed her posture change before he noticed the screen. "What is that?" he asked, already standing. Luis looked up from his book. "Another satellite?" Ellen didn't answer right away. She was checking polarization, then signal-to-noise ratio, then temporal stability. "No," she said finally, "it's not moving." Nothing in the sky truly stays still. Earth rotates, orbits shift, even distant objects smear slightly across the data if you watch long enough. This didn't. The line was sharp, clean, and growing. Mark felt a prickle at the base of his neck. "Could be interference," he said automatically. "From where?" Ellen replied. "Show me the source." They ran the checks they'd run 100 times before, cross-referenced with known emitters, checked internal diagnostics, confirmed that no local equipment was transmitting on that band. Everything came back normal. Luis stood now too, book forgotten. "I don't like that," he said, though he couldn't have explained why. At 3:18, the signal intensified. Not randomly, not chaotically. It pulsed. On, off, on. Each pulse lasted exactly the same duration. Each gap between pulses was identical. Mark swallowed. "That's regular?" Ellen nodded, eyes fixed on the screen. "Too regular." They recorded everything. Of course they did. Every bit of raw data was being archived automatically, mirrored to redundant storage both on-site and off. Protocol demanded it, but protocol did not say what to do when the universe appeared to clear its throat. At 3:18 and 30 seconds, Ellen noticed something else. The frequency was drifting now, but only slightly, stepping upward in discrete increments like someone turning a dial one click at a time. She felt a sudden irrational certainty that made her chest tighten. "This isn't noise," she said quietly. Mark didn't ask how she knew. At 3:19, the pulsing stopped. For a fraction of a second, the line went flat. Then the pattern changed. The signal broadened, spreading just enough to carry structure. Not sound, not language, but modulation, variation layered on variation, complex and deliberate. Luis whispered, "Jesus." No one told him to be quiet. The room itself seemed to demand it. For 72 seconds, the station received something that did not fit any known category. It wasn't powerful enough to be a beacon in the science fiction sense. It wasn't wide enough to be a natural burst. It sat in a perfect, uncomfortable middle ground, as if whoever or whatever had sent it was conserving energy, or uncertain. Mark started a manual annotation, his hands shaking despite himself. This is like..." "Don't," Ellen said. She didn't want metaphors. Metaphors led to assumptions. Assumptions were dangerous. At 3:19 and 42 seconds, the modulation shifted again. The pattern compressed, became denser. For a moment, just a moment, it looked almost symmetrical. Ellen felt her breath catch. There was no scientific basis for the thought that crossed her mind. It looks finished. Then, at 3:20, the signal ended. Not fading, not decaying. It stopped. The frequency snapped back to baseline. The sky returned to its familiar indifferent hiss. No afterglow, no residual noise, no trace. For several seconds, none of them spoke. Luis broke the silence first. "Is it gone?" Ellen stared at the screen as if waiting for it to reappear out of spite. "Yes." Mark checked the timestamp on the archive, then checked it again. 72 seconds, he said. "Exactly." That bothered him more than if it had been 69 or 80. Exactly 72 felt chosen. They ran diagnostics until dawn, replayed the data, verified timestamps, checked for corruption. Everything was intact. Everything was impossible. By the time the day shift arrived, the desert sky was pale and empty, as though nothing unusual had ever happened beneath it. The initial report was clinical, carefully worded, stripped of emotion. Anomalous narrowband signal detected at 3:17 Mountain Daylight Time. Duration, 72 seconds. Origin undetermined. No immediate system faults identified. It was flagged for review. Nothing more. Within a week, copies of the data had been sent to 3 other facilities for independent analysis. Within a month, it had reached people who never set foot in the control room but had opinions all the same. Equipment malfunction was the first explanation offered, a transient fault, a rare resonance in the receiver chain. The problem was that the equipment had been examined down to the component level. Nothing was out of tolerance. Nothing had failed before or after. Human error came next. Misinterpretation, overfitting patterns to noise. That explanation died quietly when analysts who had never spoken to Ellen or Mark described the same features independently. Natural phenomena were proposed. A previously unknown type of cosmic burst, a statistical outlier. But natural signals don't lock themselves to a single frequency with surgical precision. They don't pulse with metronomic regularity. They don't stop as if someone flipped a switch. Privately, some of the scientists used a word they never put in writing: intentional. Publicly, the language shifted. There is no evidence to suggest an artificial origin. The signal does not meet the criteria for further investigation. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Funding moved elsewhere. New projects took priority. The anomaly was reclassified, then archived. Ellen stayed at Black Mesa for another 2 years. She never saw anything like it again. Mark left research entirely. He told people it was because the contracts were unstable. He did not mention that, after that night, every quiet signal felt like a disappointment. Luis finished his paperback novel and donated it to a thrift store. He stopped reading during night shifts. Decades passed. The sky remained stubbornly silent. Statistically, it shouldn't have. If the signal had been random, then randomness should have produced something similar eventually. If it had been a natural phenomenon, then others like it should have appeared elsewhere. They didn't. One event, one location, one brief moment of clarity, and then nothing. The archived data still exists. You can request access in theory. Most who do are graduate students looking for a thesis angle. They study the graphs. They write papers about signal processing techniques. They avoid the uncomfortable parts, the parts where the pattern tightens just before the end, the part where it almost looks like a conclusion. No one has ever repeated the detection. No one has ever explained why, on one ordinary night in 1993, the universe did something it has not done before or since. And that leaves a question that the official statements never addressed. If it was a mistake, why was it so precise? If it was random, why did it happen only once? And if for 72 seconds something out there realized we were listening, why did it stop?